Okay, well, welcome back. So I'm going to introduce Brigit Knecht, who is the Senior Manager of Innovation for CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And we're lucky today that she's going to be explaining the, I guess we're calling it a competition around innovation that they're releasing. So Brigit has an extensive background in innovations. She's worked in a number of different government agencies, focus on smart cities, Indigenous economic development, Arctic policy, cultural policy issues. And I'm very excited today to have CMHC with us. It's a extremely important partnership to us, and we're excited to be able to bring this information to all these entrepreneurs that are tuning in today. So Brigit, you can come on in. Hopefully she'll be with us in a minute. And I want to remind everybody that we're going to be doing Q&A. So if you have any questions, there's a panel off to the side. Feel free to type in your questions there. And I believe Brigit has some handouts, some background information on this competition.
That's right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we can see
Tom.
that. Thank you very much. And I'll manage a Q&A at the end. Thanks.
Okay, terrific. Great. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. My name is Brigit Knecht, and I'm here from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to talk to you about a project that we are launching called the Housing Supply Challenge. And before I talk too much, I'm going to play a short video. Terrific. So that's our little promo video that we have that announces the challenge, which is launching officially tomorrow, October 23rd. And it's a very exciting day for us. So I'm going to explain to you what the Housing Supply Challenge is. Hope to drum up some of your interest for the round we're launching tomorrow, or possibly future rounds that we have planned, and then answer any questions that you might have. So the Housing Supply Challenge was actually announced in the federal budget in 2019, and it's designed to address the problem of barriers to housing supply. So we know that in 2016, which was our last census information, 2.9 million households across Canada were spending more than 30% of their gross income on housing, which is generally considered to be too high. We know that 1.5 million households in Canada were in core housing need. And we know that by 2030, we estimated that 2.1 million additional households would also need a place to call home. Of course, that 2030 number is pre-COVID. So actually, what the actual number is likely to be higher than that. So we know that there is a housing supply need in Canada. This program was announced to address that need specifically, and to address as a mandate the barriers to housing supply. So we're not looking to build units with this. We are looking to remove the barriers that prevent the building of units. And I'm sure a number of you are very familiar with what those barriers are and can certainly help us to think about how we might solve them. When we started doing some work on what this challenge could look like, we dug around and identified a number of barriers. The list here on your slide is not exhaustive, certainly, and it has a number of ones here that we will try to address in a challenge round, but also ones that are maybe not suited to a methodology, but are such significant barriers that they're worth listing. So you'll be familiar with these too, I'm sure. Supporting urban densification. We know that densification in different cities across the country means different things, and the public perception of that densification is sometimes a barrier. Sometimes the land availability is a barrier to densification. And now post-COVID, the question about what is densification and do we still need it? Inefficiencies in construction is certainly one that we are going to address. There's a number of new technologies out there in the construction world, and we want to try to incent and encourage the use of those to try to build housing supply more quickly and perhaps more sustainably. There's limited data on land availability and value, and here the barrier that we've chosen to explore as our first round is data-based, but it's not necessarily about land availability. It's about all the data barriers. We know that there's a lot of data out there. We know it's hard to access. We know it's not aggregated. We know there are huge gaps. So data is a significant barrier. Approval processes and timelines. This is related to pre-development. So from idea to shovel, across the full spectrum of housing, there are bottlenecks and barriers. It's not just about municipal governments needing to approve things more quickly. There are barriers at different points for everyone who participates in pre-development processes. So we'll look at those. Lack of flexible tenure options. There might be some great buildings sitting there already built that were built for ownership and could be converted to rental or other kinds of tenure models, but maybe the design of the building or some sort of legislation is preventing the use of multiple tenure types. So that's a barrier as well. Misalignment between urban infrastructure and housing plans. This is one that, we understand that people like to live near where they work. Not everybody likes to live in a condo. Not everybody wants a single family home. So where you live in proximity to your work is very important to you. And so that requires transit infrastructure and different dwelling types. Of course, this is different post-COVID too. We don't know how many of us are going to go back to the office. I am here at home, as I think everyone is today. I'm in Calgary, so it's snowing, so I'm glad to be home. Another barrier too is conflicting incentives for the creation of new supply. So we know that a lot of these barriers overlap and there's tensions between them. And it's not always that simple to just say, well, we're going to fix this one barrier. And so we're aware of that as well, something to consider. A challenge methodology is something kind of different. It's not like a typical federal funding program where we have a series of criteria and everyone makes their application to meet that criteria and the money is divvied up according to a formula or some other approach. A challenge-based methodology is really more about finding a complex issue, which we all know housing supply is very complex, and saying, we know what the objective is, we don't know how to solve it. And not one person can solve it anyways. And so to work together in a sort of collaborative approach to solving the complex problems together. And at the end of the day, there is funding amounts available, but it's not divvied up by formula, it's divvied up by quality of submission and possible scaling and implementation of the ideas. So we appreciate that local barriers require local solutions. Housing supply, we can put any number of these barriers up. It's going to be different in every community that we talk to, and we have talked to many. And so we want to make sure that we're finding solutions that will fix the or reduce the barrier in a certain region and then possibly scale to other regions. As I said, no one can solve housing supply alone. This is a team effort. We need to collaborate and we need to work together to find solutions. As our president, Evan Siddall, says, a company of 2,000 people cannot solve the housing problems for nearly 40 million people. We have to work together. And of course, a challenge approach, just by the nature of it being a challenge, people like to come out and try their hand at it. So it tends to bring new solvers out or new ideas out. So we're looking to, invite all kinds of people who might be interested in solving housing supply barriers. So the program as a whole has $300 million over 5 years. We're going to run multiple rounds of the challenge, and each round is going to address a different barrier to housing supply. And as I said, the first round is launching tomorrow, October 23rd, at the Future Cities Canada Summit. If you have already registered for that, that's where you can see our launch. We have 4 objectives. The number 1 objective is to address housing supply and affordability barriers. That is the whole purpose of this program. The second objective, of course, is to enhance community engagement. We do like to have people talking to the people who are on the ground, whose lives are impacted by the decisions that we make with regard to housing supply, and to encourage everyone to be engaged and involved. Number 3, we want to foster demonstration effect or replication or scaling. Something that we've heard as we've crossed the country talking to people about this is that there isn't really a great place to share best practices, to share ideas, and we want to make a place for that at CMHC and to try to encourage conversations and to share ideas, and so that some of the solutions that come forward can be replicated or scaled to other communities across the country. And of course, to cultivate partnerships and collaboration. We are actively working to build partnerships among applicants and between applicants and CMHC, and to foster that sort of collaboration that will bring the best innovations and solutions. So the first round we're launching tomorrow is called Data Driven. It's the round that focuses on the data barrier, as I said. And the challenge statement is there on the screen for you. We are challenging you to create data solutions that improve decision making for housing supply across Canada. And by data solutions, we mean possibly like a physical data solution in the classic sense of the word, or also possibly a methodology. There are a lot of gaps in data that require people to go out into vulnerable populations and to find and to generate that data. So it's very broad, and it's intentionally broad because we want people to identify the problem that exists where they are and to propose the solution. And by way of that, we hope to cover off a whole swath of different elements of the data barrier and to successfully reduce it for the benefit of anyone who makes decisions about housing supply. So the data-driven round is a 2-stage process. So the first stage launches tomorrow and applications are open until January 20th. That's a preliminary application. So that's where you would identify who you're working with and what your idea is, some of the potential that the idea holds for addressing the barrier, beneficiary communities that might benefit from the data produced or made accessible. From stage 1, we will evaluate the applications with an external panel of experts in the field of both data and housing, and those folks will recommend 25 shortlisted applicants who will proceed to stage 2. For stage 2, we're asking people to develop a proof of concept, which is something that we want to be tested and validated by experts, something that's ready to go to build and implement. So for this purpose, we're providing $100,000 of incubation funding to every shortlisted applicant, with the intent of reducing some of the other barriers that might exist to developing a proof of concept or to bringing an idea to us. And then afterwards, we will select a number of different solutions that will receive funding. As I said, we're trying to hit as many of those different pieces of the data barrier as possible. So we have $22.5 million in implementation funding that we will provide to selected solutions, and that will be distributed through a contribution agreement with payment milestones as we go along. So I think it's a generous round, and I hope that there is enough interest there for people to apply. There are a few key dates to remember as we head towards our launch. So number 1, there's an information session on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, and that's where we will walk through sort of critical bits of the terms and conditions of the round, things that we're looking for, eligibility questions, and so forth. That is also being hosted by the Future Cities Canada folks, but registration for that session should be free. And then on Tuesday, November 24th, we're holding a collaboration event. And this is where we're trying to help people who might have a great idea, but aren't an eligible lead applicant, or have part of an idea, but need somebody else to fill in the other part. We're trying to put people together so that they can provide and submit joint applications if that's something that's of interest. It's not a requirement, but it is something that we thought we would facilitate just to try to make sure that anybody with a great idea out there has an opportunity to apply. And then, as I said, the first stage application deadline is January 20th. I won't read this slide to you. I know you can all see it there. So how to apply? There's an application form online at our page at the Impact Canada platform. We also will have paper copies available for those of you who are not able to access the online form or have adequate bandwidth to do the whole thing through an online platform. And the deadline, as I said, January 20th. And that's in a very brief nutshell, the data round, but we do have other topics coming up. This program, as I said, runs for 5 years, and we're doing multiple rounds. And these are the rounds that we have identified to date. They're all a little bit to be determined. They have yet to be developed, and the exact launch dates are still ballpark, but we have some notions. So we're going to do one on northern housing, and that's specifically because the housing supply challenge is pan-Canadian, but we don't know that people who live in particularly rural and remote areas of the country will see themselves in something like a density based round or something like this. So we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for everyone to participate. We know that people who live in north of 60 in the provincial norths have different housing barriers and different challenges. So we want to do a round for that. The next one is the one I described to you earlier, which is about development barriers. We're going to do one on scaling solutions. So we know it's pretty easy to get to prototype, and we know it's very hard to get from prototype to implemented solution on a broad scale. So we want to try to help those prototype ideas that are out there languishing to find some footing. We're going to do a round on construction technology, which I also spoke to you a little bit about. There's a lot of great new tech out there, and I know this crowd will be particularly interested in this one. And we want to find a way to make it a feasible thing to use and to implement and to bring it to the forefront. And finally, we know that NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is a consistent problem when it comes to trying to build new developments in housing. So public perception of new housing development is another one that we're going to tackle. And, that's an interesting challenge in itself, because there's a fine line between somebody who just doesn't want something in their neighborhood and someone who's genuinely a concerned citizen with legitimate comments. So we want to try to find a way to help everybody to bridge some of those perception barriers. So here we are. Oh, look at this. We can move our little purple dot now. We are now at launch. So this is how the process works. We define the topic, we design the round, we promote, and we launch. And we're going to do that again and again, 5 times at least, maybe 6, until we have hopefully broken down as many barriers as possible, or until the minority government falls, whichever comes first. I'm glad it wasn't yesterday. That would have made this a very awkward presentation. So we have a website there for you to sign up for more information, to come to us with questions. There's also the website at the Impact Canada platform, which is where you can find the application form as of tomorrow and all of the other launch information details. So without further ado, I will open the floor to questions, and thank you again for your time.
Well, that was really informative, and I'm super excited about it personally. And I think a lot of the people that are listening today, especially the entrepreneurs that have launched businesses addressing a lot of these issues, are also super excited. It's a very well-funded program, and you're going to get a lot of submissions from the 415 people that are tuned in today.
I hope so.
So I just want to revisit framing the problem a little bit. Obviously the problem is large enough that the government has decided to put a lot of funding against it, and they've identified that there's multiple barriers. But can you give us an idea? Obviously COVID has changed the landscape a little bit, but how many people are moving into Canada? What does the shortage look like? Maybe I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Oh gosh, I don't know the demographics of recent immigration. I know it's shut down since COVID, but
generally frame the problem a little bit about our major cities. And I guess there's a big trend of people moving to urban centers, right? And that's driving the cost of housing way up.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I think it's really important to note that this challenge is not just about Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal.
Right.
I think that's maybe where the idea started. But truthfully, there are housing supply barriers in every community across the country. They just manifest differently. So while yes, we have sort of a net in-migration to our major cities, and that's causing the pressures of housing supply to be acute, we also have in certain other communities sort of an oversupply, and there's a lot of speculation in housing there, which drives the prices up as well. But every barrier that we've identified has a net result of driving housing prices up.
Yeah.
You know, if with the data round, for example, we have a lot of decision makers out there building housing supply without adequate data about who is in their community and who needs it. So what you build then is maybe the wrong thing. It's not affordable to the people who require it, and it doesn't solve your problem of inadequate housing supply. So, you know, there's each of these barriers has the same result, which is inaffordable housing in every community across the country.
Okay, so one of the questions that came in was, has there been other housing supply challenges around the world, or is this the first? And if there were others, what are you learning from what they've done?
Yes, indeed. There have not been a lot of housing supply challenges exactly like ours, but there have been a lot of challenge programs. So the Government of Canada first started in 2017 with the Smart Cities Challenge, and the Impact Canada platform, if you go to that website, you will see all the different challenges that are run by the federal government, and they're everything from how to build more efficient airline fuel to helping save whales to housing supply, all kinds of things. But also, this whole challenge thing really started off with the Ansari X Prize, which is where Elon Musk asked a bunch of billionaires to send a rocket to space, and whoever could do it first got more billions. And so now we know that's successful. He's got rockets up and down. Netflix also did an algorithm challenge, which was very successful. And there's a company out of England that we have referred to and talked to many times, and they're called Nesta. And they have run numbers of challenges on different topics, including a lot of data challenges. And so we've taken from everybody that we can possibly speak to, or who will continue to speak to us many times, about what are the pitfalls of running a challenge, what are the best approaches, how do you get people involved, all questions about the methodology, how do you choose a topic. There's been extensive work done on this.
So how, like, you're out looking for solutions to problems, do they always have to be products that can be brought to market and will create an economic benefit, or is it just potentially like, hey, I've got this solution, here you go, it costs this amount to generate, and there's not a product or a business behind?
Well, that's why we say with it being so broad, and also methodologies are open, like research methodologies are open as eligible, because we want every idea to come forward, and we don't necessarily know how those things are going to be carried beyond the challenge. We do know that we have left it open for CMHC to negotiate with funding recipients after the funding is finished to possibly adopt those methodologies or solutions and take them forward themselves. We're also actively trying to incent private sector investment in the solutions that are proposed. We do not want to run a whole program and fund great ideas and then have them drop off at the end. We want to make sure these things, the only way to really fix the barriers is to get these things actually to market. And there is an opportunity for people to commercialize their solutions after the fact, if they want to. So
what 30,000 foot view, what's the process to submit? You have to respond, I would assume, with all the supporting documents and fill out and go through a process. What's that look like?
Yeah, there's an application form that will be posted tomorrow, and that outlines all of the things that we're looking for in the preliminary application, which we've tried to keep it light because there's no funding for the first application. So we're looking for your idea. We're looking for what beneficiary communities will be served by the idea, perhaps the data type, the housing type that you will be looking at, and for people to just sort of outline their expertise, the feasibility of their project, and some of those preliminary things. And then after that, which I failed to mention in my presentation, we are working with Evergreen, who is a company that's providing applicant support. And so there is support for people in developing their preliminary applications. If you have questions or you want to bounce ideas off of them, they're available. And then beyond that, for the 25 shortlisted, they're going to run a full sort of design methodology workshop and team people up with experts to bounce their ideas off of. And we want to really make sure that these things are as robust as possible.
And then what's the evaluation process? Is there a panel? Is there the single shot caller that makes the decision? Like, how is it?
No, there's a panel. Actually, there's two panels. So for the first stage of applications, CMHC has this great thing called the College of Reviewers, where people who are both internal and external experts offer to review applications that come into all our programs for us. That is just a godsend. So those folks will do the nitty-gritty evaluation grid scoring. And all the evaluation criteria are included in the applicant guide for people who are interested. They will score those, give a score. Then those will go to the external panel that we are putting together. And these are people who are data experts, housing experts. Those folks will look at all of the applications that have sort of made the first cut and identify as many of them as we can that will address different elements of the data barrier. So you might have some that are really about data management or open data or something like this, very specific. And then you might have some that are specifically targeting at-risk youth, or I don't know, I'm making it up, anything, homelessness. There's so many possible opportunities there. Then those folks will shortlist 25. There will be the whole second stage application process. And then that same panel of external experts only will be responsible for reviewing the final applications and selecting funded recipients.
Another question here. Can the solutions that are submitted address existing affordable housing stock to make it more efficient or more affordable, like bring down the cost, I guess, of operating it? Or is it just purely about barriers to bring new net units to market?
No, we're open to solutions that address existing housing stock that needs to be repurposed or renovated or whatever, any kind of things. We're not looking at maintenance of housing stock at the end of this. So I know that's a particular concern in Indigenous communities where it's easy enough for people to go in and build things, and then the cost and the capacity to maintain is a different barrier. That's not necessarily something that we're addressing in this challenge, although we are aware that it is a problem.
Okay, another question here. I'm just going to read it. You mentioned that it is easy to prototype solutions, but hard to scale. In real estate, it seems that market-facing prototyping is virtually non-existent, which is a key limitation to innovation. How is prototyping actually happening today with your perspective?
Well, with my limited knowledge of real estate, market-facing real estate, I do know that there's a lot of prop tech that's coming out, a lot of different apps and things that are being used to help people find available housing. I know this is something that the innovation division at CMHC, of which the Housing Supply Challenge is part, is actively interested in investigating and promoting. So that's something that a different arm of my division at CMHC is looking into. But I think there is innovation out there in terms of developing those sorts of prop tech, fintech, some of those different solutions as well. And it is a question of finding those people. One of the projects that CMHC is working with right now is a program called Help Seeker, which was just a little app developer here in the wilds of Calgary that got the attention of CMHC, and now we're actively working with them to help scale up their project, which is trying to help people who are in homelessness to identify services of support, including housing services in any different community, which, if you know, those things are so disaggregated all over the place. It's very hard for people to actually access help.